Anti-fracking campaigners have been celebrating after the government decided to halt the test drilling for shale gas. The business secretary has put the indefinite ban in place because of strong earth tremors caused by the drilling that's been taking place at the site in Lancashire. The ban means a potential fracking site here in North Yorkshire at Kirby Misperton won't be able to go into production. Ian Reeve, our reporter, has been gathering together some reaction and some other details.
2017 and anti-fracking protests at Kirby Misperton in North Yorkshire were at their height. Today, just a solitary workman on the potential fracking site. The protesters have gone and it's doubtful they'll ever be coming back. The government has lost its enthusiasm and announced a moratorium for the practice. For anti-fracker Steve, in his Malton shop, it's a good day. An industry stopped until it can work out how to extract the underground gas without causing seismic tremors.
It's great news. We've been campaigning for years for this to change policy. I mean, that's why we campaign. We campaign to change policy. It's still a moratorium. Possibly they could change it after the election. I seriously don't think it's going to happen because I think that politically they will be opening themselves up in other elections, like local elections in the area. I welcome it and I think it's great news for us. I think we should be celebrating the fact, but remain vigilant at the same time.
Cricket bat maker Nick is also a veteran of the Kirby Misperton protests.
The public became enlightened that they didn't buy the government story. And who would? Quite simply, who would buy the government story? It's not a safe way to produce energy, and neither is it a cost-effective way.
There are, of course, people who say the natural resource under the ground here at Kirby Misperton should be extracted and exploited, help to cut industry's costs. They are, however, getting much harder to find. Just 2 weeks ago, a report claimed opposition to fracking has doubled in the 6 years to 2019. 40% of us now against, apparently. And that rise can in part be attributed to protests such as we saw at Kirby Misperton, or the presence of this so-called protection camp, bringing the issue to a wider audience. And whatever we may think of its residents, now long gone from their rustic shelters, they appear to have helped to see off fracking.
Ian Reeve reporting from Kirby Misperton in North Yorkshire, whereas his report showed, if you saw it on telly last night, just one guy apparently on the site at Kirby Misperton. What's your response to it? If you were into the whole idea of fracking because it would bring prosperity, would bring jobs to North Yorkshire, would give a boost to the local economy, you might be down in the mouth. I'd be interested to know whether you are. If you opposed fracking, and I think Ian said there, opposition to fracking recently, the statistics suggest that it has doubled that opposition, then you might have done a little dance of joy. I'd be interested to know your response. A frack-free North Yorkshire, good or bad news for you, for your community, for jobs, for the environment? Thank you very much indeed for comments this morning. This from... Now, if only I could read it. There we are. Shane in Pickering says, the Not In My Backyard Brigade. Fracking for shale gas gives jobs, creates prosperity and is good for the community, says Shane in Pickering, who's obviously shedding a tear that the fracking won't go ahead. Is he a lone voice in saying he's disappointed that this isn't going to happen? Let's find out what Barry in Thirsk has to say on the subject. Good morning, Barry.
Morning, Jonathan. I'm not disappointed. I'm pleased with the news.
Right, so good news as far as you're concerned. Why? Because there will be people who think, hang on a minute, here was a potential boost for the economy of North Yorkshire, for jobs, for money flowing around the community.
Oh, yes, I don't believe that either.
Go on, explain why not. I mean, it was just obvious, wasn't it? It was going to create some prosperity. It was going to mean people got work. It was going to mean there was more money around the local economy.
How many people were each side going to? If one gets a go-ahead, and it's not an environmentally friendly job of businesses or anything, this is an area that depends upon tourism, an area of outstanding national beauty. We depend upon tourism, not on these fracking sites. They cause earthquakes, we know, in Lancashire, and the government is only after trying to get some MPs in Lancashire I'm very cynical about them. If they had a large majority, they wouldn't have stopped this, I don't think. They wouldn't have it in the Stockbroker Belt, Surrey. You can bet your life on that. Or under Theresa May's patch in Maidenhead, or David Cameron's in Whitney. It wouldn't happen around there in Oxfordshire. But they're going to dump it all up here.
But the government has quite clearly said it's going to stop for the time being. Andrea Leadsom confirmed
for the time being, isn't it? That's not permanent.
So you fall into the camp of the cynics, do you? That says, hang on a minute, has this got anything to do with an impending general election?
Well, of course it has. It's happened right. This is the time they've said it, isn't it? And they're after trying to get a majority, but I don't think they're going to get a majority. I think it's going to be a hung parliament. Does it matter?
Does it in some respects, if you're pleased from an environmental point of view, and you say, well, you're cynical about that's why the government has done it.
Well,
the outcome is still, for the time being, is still exactly the same. That fracking won't happen.
Well, yeah, for the time being, we don't know long term. Look, how many people are these sites going to employ, and what's the damage to the businesses and so on? To the tourist industry. Far outweighs the damage does. Well, if we're going to, you start one, leave the door open for one, then you're going to have you could have the whole of Rydale covered in all these oil sites, these fracking sites.
Quadrilla, the energy company, the one that's been working on the plant in Lancashire, they say it hopes to address concerns about fracking, so that the ban that's been announced can be overturned as soon as possible.
Oh well, they would say that, wouldn't they? But I don't believe them. It's like the potash mine, isn't it? They were promising the earth and all the rest of it, and now it's coming to a standstill, isn't it? More or less. It'll be the same with all this fracking stuff.
Well, it only seems to have. The potash, different subject, but that only seems to have come to a temporary halt because of financial concerns. But I
could foresee that from the start. We're promising the earth, we're promising the whole universe.
Let's just focus on the fracking for the moment. Do you think that is fracking done and gone, or do you think fracking will reappear on North Yorkshire's agenda after the 12th of December?
It depends upon how many MPs the government gets. I just don't know. I don't trust them. I don't trust. There's very few politicians I trust anyway, and the Lib Dems. I think they are against fracking, and probably Labour, but no party is going to get a majority. So I don't see it going ahead in the near future.
Barry, thank you very much indeed. Barry on the line from Thirsk. Pleased at the decision to suspend, for the time being anyway, to call a moratorium, as they say, on the business of fracking in North Yorkshire. Pleased, but somewhat cynical as to the government's reasons for doing it. I'd like a clue as to your reaction, please, to news that fracking in England has effectively stopped, certainly for the time being. We've got the Business and Energy Secretary, Andrea Leadsom, confirming the, quotes, effective moratorium. She gave a written statement to the House of Commons. She said it would be maintained until compelling evidence is provided which addresses the concerns around the prediction and management of induced seismicity. I think that means minor earthquakes. Quadrilla, meanwhile, one of the big fracking companies, prime fracking companies, says it hopes to overturn the fracking suspension. I wonder what the response of people in the anti-fracking movement has been. Delight, but maybe some suspicion. I don't know. Let's find out. David Davis is from Frack Free Rydale. Good morning, David.
Yeah, good morning, Jonathan. How are you?
Not so bad. Delighted, I would have thought you were, to hear this news, or, like a couple of our commentators already this morning, somewhat cynical that this is happening just a matter of days before a general election.
Well, I think I'm going to go more on the delighted sound than the feeling of cynicism. It's been quite a long fight for those who live in areas where fracking has been given permission to take place. So I think we've got to say, we've won a battle here. We might not have won the war, but it's chipping away at people just ignoring the facts. So we've been on the right side of the facts, and I think the bottom line is we've got a government And it's going to be, it doesn't matter which political complexion they are, who are going to tell us they're the greenest government ever. Well, yeah, that's great. Let's do it.
Well,
Let's be green.
And there are cynical voices that say come the 13th of December, any moratorium would swiftly be lifted because, that will be to the advantage of the country, or at least it will be the advantage to whoever turns out to be the ruling party after the 12th of December.
Well, obviously, such things are within the gift of any government, and I'm not going to sit here and say anything other. But I think the telling fact around the moratorium is, it relies on some scientific work that, as far as I'm aware, hasn't taken place yet. Because if it's had, I'm sure the Oil and Gas Authority would be fully aware of it, and they prepared the advice to the government to say, well, we can't confirm it's safe to continue. And it just sort of backs at what we've been saying for 6 years, that we don't actually know what we're doing, and this is all a big experiment.
Did this come? I'm interested to know, just from an anti-fracking campaigner point of view. Did this just come out of left field? Was this entirely unexpected? Just an announcement one day, fracking will stop for the time being, or did you have an inkling it was going to come?
Well, we had no real inkling that it was going to come, but I mean, we've had a presence at most of the political party conferences for a number of years now, because it's clear to us from quite early on that the people who hold the power here are the government, and as locally, in planning terms, it might be North Yorkshire County Council, but overall, in terms of the law of the land, it's the UK government. So, oil and gas lobby, they've got millions of pounds they spend on lobbying the government. We don't have that, so we've done what we can, and it looks as though people are starting to sort of look at the facts. And we have said all along that we don't believe anybody really knows what happens at 10,000 feet underground, and I think what has occurred over in Lancashire has rather proven that to be the case.
Quadrilla say as soon as they get the chance, they're going to sort of redraw their battle lines, as it were. You've talked about battles and wars, and they're going to work as hard as they can, perhaps not surprisingly, given that it's their bread and butter,
I'm sure they are. Yeah, they
overturn the decision.
Safe. Yeah, they believe it's safe, and all I can say is there is evidence which I consider to be compelling from around the world where this has happened, and to be quite honest, it's in a country where we are relatively quite a populated country, have a very small landmass. It really isn't the number one thing on your list if you want to provide energy, particularly when you look at the price of renewable energy now, wind, solar, all of that. The price has come down so much it can compete without subsidy. We know fossil fuels, we shouldn't be using them, and increasing the amount that we use. Yeah, we do need some of that resource to do things that are important that can't be done in any other way. And I'm not sitting here saying we should get rid of all fossil fuels, but we don't need to be increasing them. And the climate change emergency, at long last, people are taking this seriously.
David, I wonder what you say to your namesake, who is Dave in sunny Doncaster, to use his words. He says Doncaster was riddled with coal mines. He used to work down a pit for 30 years. He says these anti-fracking people in North Yorkshire, I think he might mean you and your associates, drive him crazy. He says they're just worried about slight disturbances in their own pretty gardens, but no one was bothered about him and his area in the days of coal mining.
Yeah, well, strangely, I lived in Doncaster, and my very first job was working in a shop that fronted onto the marketplace in Doncaster in the 70s. And Doncaster is like so many northern towns. It's had the heart ripped out of it because we've lost all of those extractive industries, the factories. It was a very rich place. We had a massive manufacturing industry across the range of all sorts of things in Doncaster.
And Dave's point, though, is that nobody was shedding a tear for Doncaster, where, as you say, you lived and worked as well.
Well, Dave's wrong. I mean, in those days, when the miners' strike was on, I didn't actually have a TV, and I can remember when I went back to see my parents in Doncaster, I caught the Battle of Orgreave on a weekend news summary, and I was absolutely stunned. And I actually have friends who worked down the pit in the old days, and to be quite honest, the miners were used as a political tool.
All right, we're taking it away from the politics of the miners' strike. The point he's making is that he perhaps detects a note of, I don't know how one might describe it, NIMBYism when it comes to North Yorkshire. It was okay to rip up the area around Doncaster and cause all the seismic problems that coal mining caused. But when it comes to a nice county like North Yorkshire, well, he makes reference to people being concerned about their nice gardens. Well,
I don't think it's anything to do with that. It's to do with the environmental impacts of it all. And we're not talking about the environmental impact on gardens. We're talking about it in the context of emissions, public health, and the energy security argument. The government's own reports, energy security. It'll add a tiny bit of diversity to our supply, but I mean we actually export quite a bit of the gas that we produce.
David, we shall leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. David Davis from the organisation Frack Free Rydale, a happy man, as many of those who opposed fracking will be. Here's an anonymous texter this morning to 81333. Good morning, Devil's Advocate. Are you talking to me? I think you might be. Good morning, Devil's Advocate, says Anonymous. What good is prosperity, which is what I suggested fracking might have brought if it was going to happen? What good is prosperity if your food and water gets poisoned by the cocktail of chemicals? Or if your gorgeous Yorkshire cottage needs underpinning due to earth tremors? Or your house gets flooded due to climate change caused by methane excess from fracking? I hope, says this anonymous texter, this isn't a stunt. Well, we shall wait and we shall see. Certainly Alan is on the line from Scarborough. Morning, Alan.
Morning.
You've not been past the phone with no home, have you?
I haven't, no.
No, not to the best of your knowledge. Tell me about fracking. This news that it's being suspended. Are you delighted or dismayed?
Oh, I'm pleased, yeah.
Why?
Well, I think that the people who live in the area are at great risk because whenever these things occur with fracking, from what I've heard, there may be one property within a group of properties that's structurally damaged, and their chances of claiming against the company are probably zero.
Why do you say that?
Well, there was a German lady on this radio, about a year ago, and she said that back home, where they'd promised that they would recompense people, wherever, was right to do, she said the companies absolutely dug their heels in and refused. Now, the point is, there could very likely be, on many separate occasions, a situation where one householder is trying to claim on his own, as it were, and the chances of him taking on a company in a legal matter is absolutely outgunned. What of a chance?
Alan, thank you for that thought. So that's Alan's reason for being pleased that fracking is on hold for the time being. David is calling from Driffield this morning. Morning, David.
Morning.
What's your
third David Davis of the
Absolutely,
day.
it's the morning of the Davids. What's your take on the news that fracking isn't going to go ahead, at least for the time being?
Deeply cynical.
Explain why.
My concern is energy shortages in the future. And I think at some point when energy starts running out, we are going to have to do fracking.
Really? So you think that fracking is, whether people like it or not, when the lights start going out, it's going to be inevitable?
Yeah.
Despite what's been said now, because I mean, the government has been quite straightforward about this. They've said it is because, this is Andrea Leadsom. She said that the ban would be maintained until compelling new evidence is provided, which addresses the concern around induced minor earthquakes. So whether anybody is ever going to convince all parties that they've got that prediction absolutely right and spot on, goodness only knows.
Quite. And the The point was made earlier on that there doesn't seem to have been the scientific investigation, which needs to be viewed by an independent. It's both sides are so extreme. It needs to be someone in the middle who can actually look at the scientific evidence.
Even the experts disagree, I think we'll find. David in Driffield, thank you very much indeed, who thinks that fracking might be inevitable one day when the energy starts to run out or run low. Our reporter has been asking people in the Heworth area of York this morning what they think about the news that fracking has, at least for the time being, been put on hold.
I think more research needs to be done. It does seem that it's dangerous. And I think it's the right decision to stop it until they're sure that there's no environmental consequences.
It isn't something that I have strong feelings about and sadly it's probably because it isn't affecting me and there seems to be so much else going on, but there are a lot of people who it means a lot to, and if there is dangers then it should be stopped.
I think we just need to know more about it, really do. I know it happens in America and places, but we're only a small island. There's different forms of energy. They've got the wind farms. I don't like the wind farms, but we've got the wind farms. And they're trying to find other forms of energy. I don't think this is the right way. Not at all.
Drilling into the earth, no, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't agree with fracking, that's it.
I think that sometimes the government are too eager to do these things without researching them thoroughly. That's what concerns me. But you don't want earthquakes, do you?
Nobody's done this before, this lot of drilling. And there's been some earthquakes. Minor ones, but there have been some.
There have been some, lady. Yep. The thoughts of the good folks of Heworth this morning on the news that fracking is, for the time being, going to come to an end.